1969, a year when the world was riveted to the sight of a man taking a walk, with that walk marking man's first steps on the moon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, three astronauts who embarked on an incredible adventure 30 years ago. This is the story of that remarkable journey. Alone on the launch pad, the Saturn V rocket awaited its passengers.
After a decade of planning and hard work, we're willing and ready to attempt to achieve our national goal.
Once en route, there would be no turning back. The command module sat atop the 363-foot, 7.6 million pound thrust vehicle. As daybreak approached, three men somberly prepared for launch. Neil Armstrong, Commander, Apollo 11. Edwin Buzz Aldrin, Lunar Module Pilot. Michael Collins, Command Module Pilot.
Would maybe sum up my feelings in a word of anticipation. This is what, to me, characterizes my feelings right now as I look forward to the next few days.
It seemed to me that at that time I was most interested in just getting that thing off. Above all, I did not want to recycle, to have to empty out those gigantic fuel tanks and try again a different day. I just desperately wanted to go on the 16th of July.
Right on time as far as the astronaut countdown is concerned, the prime crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center. Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and then finally Mike Collins, plus their suit technicians and Director of Flight Crew Operations Deke Slayton now boarding the transfer van for the trip to the launch pad.
Well, every launch day is a time of excitement, enthusiasm, and apprehension. But I think in most circumstances, you always feel that the chances of actually lifting off are fairly distant or remote. And you have to temper your enthusiasm with the realization that, in fact, you may be coming back in and trying to go another day.
40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
Most memorable thing that I can recall about that particular day was the opportunity while my two friends here were being put into the spacecraft to stand alone by myself out there and look at the rocket and the quietness and see the sun come up and the waves rolling in and the evidence of the millions of people watching, but nothing specific and just so quiet, and to realize that indeed such a contrast was going to take place, all the frantic activity preparing the rocket, but it was so quiet up there for me personally, and that in a very few moments we were going to be departing in a great roar and off for a momentous event.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6.
pass that on, and it certainly looks like you're well on your way now.
We believe that Mike Collins is now maneuvering the spacecraft in the transposition and docking maneuver, and the antenna patterns aren't too good at the moment. So we have a weak signal strength.
The impressions of the moon started much earlier on our approach, thousands of miles. As we got closer and closer, we could see more and more. As we got down into low orbit about the moon, we could see additionally more. We kept getting impressions. Then the final descent, we got closer, and after landing, of course, we were very close. We had hours to stand there a mere 15 feet, say, above the surface and look at pretty much everything that was available out the front windows.
Okay, 75 feet. Car's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. Forward. Forward. 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. Straight shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds. Forward, drift. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. At the foot of the ladder. The LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the LEM. That's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
We had a sense of the gravity, the character of the environment there. So long before we actually got out on the surface, we already had pretty good appreciation for what the moon was like.
Neil had a much better view during the powered descent of that transition right down to the surface. I think I was relieved by the ease that we had in being able to maneuver around. Perhaps impressed by the talcum powder nature of the fine surface itself. As you'd look at a boot print, it just was so smooth, just like you'd put your foot in talcum powder. It was just a many-faceted moon. It was a stranger to me before the mission, but I now look back at it as somewhat of a friend, a place that I've visited.
Magnificent sight out here.
Magnificent desolation. Is very, very fine powder, isn't it?
Isn't it fine?
Hey, Neil, didn't I say we might see some purple rocks?
Find the purple rocks?
Yep. Very small, sparkly fragments.
Buzz is erecting the solar wind experiment now.
Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Houston, Columbia, on the high gate, over.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That's all right, I don't mind a bit. Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
I've certainly felt that the American flag is what belonged there. It's characteristic of previous explorations to plant a symbol upon arriving at a new shore, and it indeed was a philosophical moment of achievement. It was also a technical challenge, as we found that the flag didn't exactly perform as we put it together, and it didn't stick in the ground exactly the way we thought it would. There was no breeze to wave it, so we had to maybe artificially create a little breeze. So it was a great mixture with, I think, a sense of pride, and it will be a remembering event photographing individuals alongside the flag.
Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made. I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what you... For every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure they too join with Americans in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. And as you talk to us from the Sea of Tranquility, it inspires us to redouble our efforts to bring peace and tranquility to Earth. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to Earth.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here representing not only the United States, but men of peace of all nations, and with interest and a curiosity and with a vision for the future. Honor for us to be able to participate here today.
And thank you very much, and I look forward, all of us look forward to seeing you on the Hornet on Thursday. Look forward to that very much, sir.
I think the most rewarding part of Apollo 11 was having it to be the major event in my life, which changed my life entirely and gave me an opportunity to reorder priorities and chart a course off for the future based on a new life of being a representative of the human race, having done a very significant thing. And it's enabled me to deal with that in a way where I feel very confident about the future and my participation in helping to shape the future of the space program.
Columbia, this is Houston, over.
The Earth does appear fragile from space. Part of it is simply it's so small. It's about the size of your thumbnail if you hold your arm out at full length. And it, of course, is absolutely spherical. Atmosphere is not apparent. It shines. It bounces the sunlight very well. So you have this very small, very shiny spherical object, and somehow it just appears to me, at least, extremely fragile. That would be the one most fundamental quality that it projects, is one of fragility. I don't know why, but it does.
When we're on the surface of the moon, even though the Earth was only a slight 24 degrees off the vertical, there was no traction on my part to divert my attention from where we were and what we were doing, to look up at it, except for the one time when we tried to take a moving picture, or a stirring picture, a memorable picture. And it certainly, in retrospect, looked awfully small. Personally, there was a time when an ironic thought sort of filtered through my mind that here Neil and I were so far away from home, much further than people had ever been, and yet at that same time there were more thoughts, concerns back so far away on what it is that we were doing at that very moment. And I thought that was very unique in the history of mankind.
The thing about the moon that I thought was peculiar was that it seemed to depend on the angle of the sun. when the sun was almost overhead and it was noon down below, the moon appeared to be a warm and a friendly place. On the other hand, near dawn or dusk, it became very foreboding looking. The craters cast very long shadows, and the place looked distinctly unfriendly. So I was intrigued by the contrast based purely on what angle the sun happened to be. Well, I enjoyed being in the command module by myself. It was a happy little home. All the machinery was working properly, and my concerns were not within the command module, but simply that something might go wrong with the LEM, with the lunar module, and these two guys might get stuck on the surface of the moon. That was my main concern.
In the past 2 or 3 days here on board our spacecraft, we've come to the conclusion that this has been far more than 3 men on a voyage to the moon. More still than the efforts of a government and industry team. More even than the efforts of one nation. We feel that this stands as a symbol of the insatiable curiosity of all mankind to explore the unknown. Apollo 11, signing off.
We don't have to stay here on Earth. We have a choice of where we want to go and stay, either here on Earth or on the moon or beyond the moon on a place like Mars. I think that was to me, the fundamental lesson of Apollo. We can operate successfully in places other than the surface of the Earth.
Going to the moon certainly was the first expedition departing the Earth and viewing back on the Earth, and in its very simplistic initial challenges that it gave us ways of looking at other planets in the universe and gave us a better perspective as to how to look back on our own planet and to make judgments as to its origin and perhaps some of the dangers that it might face in the future and how to go about analyzing that. Certainly the moon had many contrasts. It's not a live tectonic body. It's a very dead object created by combinations of volcanism and meteorite impact. Rather than answering many questions, I think it raised many more questions, but certainly our level of understanding was immeasurably increased, and it's not for us necessarily to give the best appraisal of that.
Well, of course, all three of us had flown in orbit before and seen the wonders of Earth as seen from space. This was a new experience for us in seeing it from a fairly long distance away. It does probably have a change in character as you become farther away. I think you most notice that, though, at the time you leave Earth. When you're departing at a great rate, it's very clear that this is an unusual experience.
Well, the Earth, as it appears from the moon, is a very small and fragile object. And when you think about it, that's not an inaccurate description. Certainly, a lot of the things that we do down here can affect the balance in a very fragile way. The greenhouse effect we're noticing today, for example, the changes between a healthy atmosphere and an unhealthy atmosphere are very subtle, very, very fragile, and you sort of get that feeling when you look at the Earth from a great distance.
Hornet reports a sonic boom a short time ago.
Houston, and the blind air boss has a visual contact. Apollo 11, Houston, through Araya, standing by. Over. Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over. Apollo 11, reading you loud and clear. Our position 1330, 6915.
People who come here to this museum and look at our spacecraft Columbia are most often struck by its small size, which from their perspective is understandable. From our point of view, the command module was a wonderful improvement over our previous spacecraft, which were really cramped. And so we enjoyed the luxury of a big volume machine.
Yeah, I thought we had amazingly good accommodations. We had hot and cold water. The food was even edible. All in all, it was a nicely packaged small enclosure, and we could comfortably have stayed there far in excess of 8 days.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. But in a very real sense, it will not be one man going to the moon. We make this judgment affirmatively, it will be an entire nation. For all of us must work to put him there.
There's so many things that can go wrong on a trip to the moon and back. It's sort of a long and fragile daisy chain of events, and I can remember being in the mobile quarantine facility, the little house trailer aboard the aircraft carrier after we landed in the Pacific, and thinking, gee, none of them did. None of those little links broke. And to me, that was the amazing part, that everything worked in some as well as it did.
Of course, we did go back a number of times after our departure, and for a combination of reasons, that program was terminated in favor of other new initiatives. Do you think there's an increasing momentum to to go back to the moon. Their studies of the moon are indicating more and more new reasons why it does make sense to go back, but I'm not in a position to say right now when we might make that next trip.
I'd prefer to see us go to Mars rather than go back to the moon, unless we need the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. It could be that in studying Mars, you will discover that the best way to do it is by way of a base on the moon, and if that turns out to be the case, well and good, but I see the moon really not as an end in itself, but really a stepping stone to deeper space, to Mars and to the planets beyond.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, pioneers on a new frontier. A frontier that would challenge each new explorer.
Minus 10.
Landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Made engine start.
Right away, Houston.
Back as our countdown continues. Skip Chauvin informing the astronauts that the swing arm now coming back. 4 minutes and counting. We are go for Apollo 11. We'll be coming up in the automatic sequence about 10 or 15 seconds from this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Firing command coming in now. We're on an automatic sequence as the master computer supervises hundreds of events occurring over these last few minutes. 2 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Oxidizer tanks in the second and third stages now have pressurized. T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds. The third stage completely pressurized. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6.
How far out are we now, Charlie? Stand by, I'll give you an exact figure. Did you notice the difference between yesterday and today? This is as large an image as we can give you. Roger, it's distinctly smaller. You're now 177,000 miles out, over. Say again, we're about 95 degrees east, coming up on Smythe Street.
Roger, and for your information, we show you at an altitude of about 92 miles above the surface right now.
We're moving the camera over to the right window now to give you Langren. It's several central peaks. And,
Roger, we got Langrenitz in our screen now.
Stand down. Straight shadow. Stand
Four
forward. 4 forward, drift into the right level. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Forward, just. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Neil, we can see you coming.
Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. That isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up. Roger, we copy. It's a pretty good little jump.
Okay.
I'm at the foot of the ladder. The LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the LEM now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Yeah, radio loud and clear. How's it going?
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. I believe they're setting up the flag now.
Great.
I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That's all right. I don't mind a bit. How is the quality of the TV?
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Beautiful, just beautiful. Apollo 11, signing off.